Hello, and welcome. Welcome once again to the Start, Scale, and Succeed podcast. It's the only podcast that grows with you through all 7 stages of your journey as a founder. And there's something that I see, particularly for those in the latter parts of our journey, in stage 7. You have built more than most people could ever hope to build. You've accumulated more resources, and whether that be financial wealth or relational wealth or network wealth, and you're sitting there in what most people would define success, yet you're haunted by this question: what do I actually want to leave behind? Because you look at those bank accounts, but you still somehow feel empty inside. You look at your companies and wonder what's going to happen when you're gone, what's going to happen when they're gone. And you realize you've been playing on a field that's too small. And this is especially true in stage 7. Now, it's not a new question, right? This dates back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And fortunately, we can look back some of those years to find some answers from those who've gone before us, specifically a 15th century banker of all things. And to help us figure that out is the one and only Cris Auditore Zimmermann, who is a seasoned entrepreneur, global investor, and keynote speaker with over 25 years of experience. He emphasized the importance of strategic planning and legacy building. He's founded more than 20 companies across 5 countries, authored Get Your House in Order, and co-founded the Medici Community. Cris empowers entrepreneurs to harness the timeless principles of the Medici legacy to build lasting success and impact. Well, Cris, welcome to the show. So excited to have you here, calling in from Frankfurt, Germany, if I'm correct.
Yes, Scott, greetings here from Germany. And I love it that you have a German last name as well.
I had another guest on the show, and he corrected the pronunciation of my name for me. So I learned how to say my name.
It's Ritzheimer. It's very simple. Ritzheimer there's no doubt about how to pronounce your name.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. It's got a little too much phlegm for me, but that's all right. All right. So, Cris, you've done a thing or two in your life. You've started 20 companies, 5 countries, and by just about any measure of success, it's been remarkable, right? But you tell the story of, I believe it was back in 2020, you found yourself having a panic attack on a beautiful vacation in a wonderful place. What happened? What led to this? And how did a story about an Italian banker turn it all around?
Well, yes, I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been building companies here. I'm from Frankfurt, Germany, and I studied law at Frankfurt University, but I never really wanted to be in law. I've always been creating companies, and been doing that for many, many years. But what was absolutely dramatic was exactly that incident that you just mentioned in 2020 during the pandemic. Obviously, different places around the world had different ways on how to handle the pandemic. Germany was on a brutal lockdown. For about a year, we couldn't go to any restaurants. We couldn't go out to fitness studios. They even closed down golf courses with the explanation of social distancing, which I have no idea how you cannot have a social distance on a golf course. And anyhow, I have a family. I've been married for almost 25 years to my wife, Andrea. And we've got 3 boys. And we had 3 teenagers sitting here at home, playing video games all day long. Homeschooling didn't work. And it was just a terrible year for us. I'm naturally more of an extrovert. I like to have meetings. I like to go to the office. I like to fly around the world and do the different projects and different companies. And I couldn't do any of that. And then my wife wasn't doing well. She had a health issue with her heart and hit something like a burnout. Everyone was mad at me because I was very irritated at home. So we had a house on fire, and that's literally why I called the book that I wrote a couple of years later "Get Your House in Order," because that's literally what I had to do. I needed to get my house in order, and I got inspired on a vacation in the beautiful city of Florence in Italy, when I learned more about the Medici family, or the Medici family, specifically the founding patriarch. His name is Cosimo de' Medici, and he probably was the wealthiest person in the 15th century. it's a little bit more difficult to measure these things nowadays because the currencies are different. But he was a self-made entrepreneur. They started off as cloth merchants. They went into banking, and then they built this incredible banking empire all over Europe. And as I was reading about him during my moment or my time really of crisis, and I don't use this word crisis lightly, because literally it didn't feel at all good for myself. It didn't feel good for my family, and it also didn't feel good for a number of our companies. The interest rates started climbing during that time. I had a number of deals fall through. So also economically and financially, it wasn't a good time for us as a family. I kind of started digging myself into someone who lived 500 years ago, and this kind of sent me off on a journey to really learn from some families from the past on how do you set up yourself, how do you set up your family, and how do you set up your business. And so I can say that the last few years I've been on this quest of learning more, and this is what I'm very passionate about.
Yeah. It caught me because Get Your House in Order was not exactly what I expected from a title of a business book. And so there's this interplay between our life and entrepreneurship and how intertwined those are. But you also think of, you speak to something very specific, and it's not one house, but four. So walk us through from your book, the four different houses and why they're relevant to us as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so that was actually what was so surprising to me. So I had always learned about the Medici family. Growing up in Germany, it's part of our normal high school education that you learn that in the 15th century, the Renaissance family that literally kind of became the great patrons of the arts. They sponsored people like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Donatello. They had some popes. They worked themselves into the Catholic Church. They intermarried with the House of Spain. They intermarried with the House of France. So I'd always known kind of about them being kind of this very extravagant, successful business family. But when I started reading about the life of specifically Cosimo, the founding patriarch, I was so astonished that literally he wasn't just successful on his business side, but it kind of became obvious to me that he had the different areas of his life in order. And, this is how the title of this book came about, and so I've structured the book in a sense where I take people through this journey in Florence, in Italy, where there are these different houses, which most of them you can still visit today. Wow. So the first one is what I've called the House of Personal Development. So Cosimo bought a countryside home called Villa di Careggi, which is just outside of Florence back then. Now it is actually included because the city has grown. And it was so interesting. This was a house where a countryside home where he would go. And I literally found some quotes where he said that he goes there to work on himself.
Wow.
And so, not to take care of business, even though he had lots of people employed and he was running all kinds of things, but he literally had a physical location where he, as an entrepreneur, would go to work on himself. And so a few things that kind of stood out. One of them was that in the mornings he would get up very early to kind of work himself in the garden. Water the flowers, perhaps plant a few trees, and literally get his hands a little bit dirty in gardening. Now, I'm not a gardener, but I thought it's quite interesting for a guy who can employ thousands of people to do his gardening.
Yeah.
That he had a location where he would spend time, and he said that it's almost like this gave him fresh wind under his wings and fresh air to breathe. And then he started assembling a library at the Villa di Careggi. Which was very astonishing. He lived before the printing press was invented, so he grew up in a house where there were 3 books. Because there were no books. No one had books around. But he went on this hunt for books. Actually, before he entered fully into business, he had 2 years where he went scouting around the world to collect books, ancient manuscripts of Greek philosophy, theology books, all kinds of wisdom literature, and brought it back to his home. So by the end of his life, at his Villa di Careggi, he had this massive library, which now is one of the most fundamental European libraries we have in the whole continent. And so he, as a business guy, was a reader. He loved to read, devour books, climb into the manuscripts of Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, and that's why he and his family is called the Renaissance family, because they rebirthed some of the old ancient wisdom.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
that's
so
great.
so he had this place for personal development, but then the other kind of houses, just to hint at that. The Villa Medici, which is downtown Florence, I call it the House of Relationships. He was very much a relationship manager. He built his own family there, but he also built very strong relationships with popes and kings from around the world, and he would host them at his place, and they sit around the campfire in the evening there in his house and kind of share some of these stories, and then he would also host the artists, and so build relationships with the artists. Like Donatello, for example, lived with the Medici family. They would discuss the artworks over dinner. So House of Relationships is the second one. Third one is it's the House of Influence. It's kind of the political center, the Signoria in Florence that he would go to in order to influence the city, the good of the city, get involved in politics. And the fourth one is the House of Business, which is the Medici Bank.
Yeah. There's so much in that we could unpack for hours. I think one of the interesting things about Stage 7 in particular that you touched on just briefly, and I'd like for you to expound on a little more for us, is that it's not just business, right? So it's the personal development, it's the relationship, and it's influence, which I think is a really, really key piece in Stage 7, that we're moving away from control of everything to influence in a much greater scale. How did he think about influence, especially toward the latter part of his life?
Yeah, Scott, a great question, and that's very true. So basically, this is where I find myself after this 2020 pandemic. I basically reorganized my life and our companies. So I own like 26 or 27 different companies around the world. Mainly, I'm an investor now. I'm not operational anymore, so I handed over all operational work, and now we run things through our family foundation, which is all about not just as you say at the beginning of the different stages, kind of the hustle and the building out phase, but it's really now about how do you structure things, not just for yourself, but also for your family, for your kids, for your grandkids and their kids, and so forth, but also for impact in this world. At some point, it's really, it's not about just another deal. It's not just about another investment and whether you have a few more euros or US dollars on your bank account. It's really kind of what kind of impact you want to have in this world. And so this is, if you've ever been, have you been to Florence, Italy? Have you ever taken a trip over?
I have not.
Well, Scott, I'd love to invite you, because that's one of the things that I by now do is I invite business families to come and join me on one of these trips. Basically, the Medici family constructed the city of Florence. So, every palazzo, every church, the cathedral, the museums that people go to in Florence, they all stem out of a building period where the Medici family was in power and in influence. And so what is fascinating is that they literally went beyond just money, just creating a successful business. They really invested into culture and into art and into the sciences and religion, and many other things. But that's why they call the Renaissance family. And so one of the great joys that I have now is to be thinking through strategically, how can I do that with my little family, with my few companies? How can I set them up? And that's where it goes beyond just, let's say, financial success. It also really goes about impact in the world.
It's so true. It's so true. Cris, there's this question that I ask all my guests. I'm very interested to see what you'd have to say. But in the light of this conversation and where you are in your journey, what would you say is the biggest secret that you wish wasn't a secret at all? What's that one thing you wish everybody watching or listening today knew?
So that basically what I'm trying to draw out here, there are about 1,000 books written on the Medici family, and they're all written by historians and art historians, which are wonderful people to kind of record the story of this family. But what I'm trying to draw out is some of the principles that actually help us, shape our lives and our families and our companies. And so I almost feel like it's a missing secret that there are principles that can help and guide us towards success, significance, and legacy. And it's almost like we do not have to walk in the dark, but there are things we can learn and study, and it needs some brain capacity, it needs some good thinking, it needs some research, but there are things we can work out that can help us in the present to be successful, and that's what I think oftentimes gets missed. That it's not just the nice country that you're born into, or the kind of nice degree that you've got from university, or some luck in finding some investors to invest in your company, but there are steps to take in order to set yourself, your family, and your business up for success and legacy.
Yeah. So good. Cris, there's this old Greek proverb, I'm sure you're aware of it. It says, society grows great when old men plant trees under whose shade they'll never sit. And stage 7's rarefied air. It's not often that we get to see folks who have been there, let alone really looked at how stage 7 works and made that pathway easier for those who follow in our footsteps. So thank you so much for being on the show. Before I let you go, I have to know, how can folks reach out to you and find out more? Where can they get a copy of the book?
Yeah, so I've on our family foundation, we've set up what we call the Medici Community, where we're involving business families from around the world who really want to think beyond, just success. How do you create a legacy? So under MediciLegacy.com. MediciLegacy.com. You can get a download of my book. I just wrote actually a second book on the life of Lorenzo de' Medici, which is the grandson of Cosimo, and that book is coming out very soon. It's called From Success to Significance. And there are some lessons from the art and the leadership of Lorenzo de' Medici, some leadership principles. I'd be very happy if you or any of your listeners are interested to really kind of work on the theme of legacy. We've really created a realm of learning together. So that's where I'd be happy to be in touch.
That's fantastic. Cris, thank you so much. Privilege and honor having you here with us today. And for those of you watching and listening, your time and attention mean the world to us. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I know I did, and I cannot wait to see you next time. Take care.